Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's afternoon devotional and Bible study. It is January 26th. I almost said 25th, and I was like, that's wrong. It's the 26th already. Holy cow. Time is flying by. Today, we're going to be reading through the book of 1 Samuel chapter 10. And we'll be reading Jesus is Calling for today. So let's jump into it. January 26th. 2021. Give up the illusion that you deserve a problem-free life. Part of you is still hankering for the resolution of all difficulties. This is a false hope. As I told my disciples, in this world you will have trouble. Link your hope not to problem solving in this life, but to the promise of an eternity of problem-free life in heaven. Instead of seeking perfection in this fallen world, pour your energy into seeking me, the perfect one. It is possible to enjoy me and glorify me in the midst of adversity, in the mix of adverse circumstances. In fact, my light shines most brightly through believers who trust me in the dark. That kind of trust is supernatural, a product of my inward indwelling spirit. When things seem all wrong, trust me anyway. I am much less interested in right circumstances than in right responses to whatever comes your way. And that was inspired by two different sections. The first, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. John 16:33. And then, even in darkness, light dawns for the upright, for the gracious and compassionate and righteous man. He will have no fear of bad news. His heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord. Psalm 112, 4 and 7. Yeah. I've always liked that Bible verse of, like, in this world we will have trouble, but don't fear. Jesus has overcome the world. So often, Christians, we seem to be guilty of offering like this life in the fullest, and almost promising that once you start following Christ, all your problems are magically gone, and that's not the case. It's just that we have someone to go through and walk through our troubles with. And because of the false teaching of like, hey, your problems are going to be gone, a lot of times people that follow Christ, when they come across really hard times and times when they're just struggling to find motivation to get out of bed in the day, they think that their faith is garbage, that they've done a bad job because those lies start building in. But our strength isn't in this side or the other. Our strength is in God. God gives us the strength to move forward, to do, and to be. And yeah, God doesn't promise to take away our trouble, though he does do that for some people. He promises to walk with us through it. So I like that. And yeah, some of like my heroes of faith are ones that kept their faith in the darkest of times. And that goes back to the story that we're reading as well with Samuel. So grab your Bibles, open up to the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 10. And yeah, as all hope was lost, Samuel was raised up to be the prophet. He kept his faith even though it seemed like all hope was lost. Samuel kept trying to lead, and he did. He led Israel. And the Israelites even though, uh, you know, they ended up having a really dark time, they still ended up getting the Ark of the Covenant back. They wanted a king, despite God's warnings on how bad it was going to be. They wanted a king, and then we got introduced to Saul. Saul was a very handsome, tall man whose family had a bit of power and influence, but power and influence compared to other people within, like, you know, like they weren't slaves. They had slaves and stuff like that. They had some wealth, but they weren't necessarily the most wealthy. But they did have some of that stuff, and they lost some donkeys, and they went to go find some donkeys. And it was a couple days journey of them looking, going, okay, I guess we have nothing. And then the servant was like, but wait, I think that that village over there has Samuel, like the prophet. Maybe he can help us. And Saul was like, yeah, but I have nothing to give him for him to help him. There's no reason for him to help us because I'm broke. And they go anyway, just hoping that maybe the prophet will see them. They have like one piece of silver between them. And Samuel sees Saul and was like, hey, it's you. Yeah, God has some awesome things planned for you. And Saul's just like, what are you talking about? Don't you know, like, I'm garbage. Why are you talking to me like this? And Samuel made him the head of the table, had this big feast around him, sent the servant away and said, don't worry about the donkeys, God's got it. And then as Saul and the servant are getting ready to head back to Saul's family, Samuel stops Saul. And that's where our story is going to continue. That was a pretty in-depth recap of chapter 10. So if you didn't read it with me, you now know. All right, so chapter 10, 1 Samuel. I'm going to take a sip of coffee first. All right. 1 Samuel chapter 10. Samuel anoints Saul as king. Then Samuel took a flask of olive oil and poured it over Saul's head. He kissed Saul and said, I am doing this because the Lord has appointed you to be ruler over Israel, his special possession. When you leave me today, you will see two men beside Rachel's tomb at Zelzah, on the border of Benjamin. They will tell you that the donkeys have been found and that your father has stopped worrying about them and is now worried about you. He is asking, have you seen my son? When you get to the oak of Tabor, you will see three men coming toward you who are on their way to worship God at Bethel. One will be bringing 3 young goats, another will have 3 loaves of bread, and the third will be carrying a wineskin full of wine. They will greet you and offer you 2 of the loaves, which you are to accept. When you arrive at Gibeah of God, where the garrison of the Philistines is located, you will meet a band of prophets coming down from the place of worship. They will be playing a harp and a trombone, a flute and a lyre, and they will be prophesying. At that time, the Spirit of the Lord will come powerfully upon you, and you will prophesy with them. You will be changed into a different person. After these signs take place, do what must be done, for God is with you. Then go down to Gilgal ahead of me, and I will join you there to sacrifice burnt offerings and peace offerings. You must wait for 7 days until I arrive and give you further instructions. Samuel's signs are fulfilled. As Samuel turned and started to leave, God gave him a new heart, and all Samuel's signs were fulfilled that day. When Saul and his servant arrived at Gibeah, they saw a group of prophets coming toward them. Then the Spirit of God came powerfully upon Saul, and he too began to prophesy. When those who knew Saul heard about it, they exclaimed, "What? Is even Saul a prophet? How did the son of Kish become a prophet?" And one of those standing there said, "Can anyone become a prophet, no matter who his father is?" So that is the origin of the saying, "Is even Saul a prophet?" When Saul had finished prophesying, he went up to the place of worship. "Where have you been?" Saul's uncle asked him and his servant. "We're looking for the donkeys," Saul replied, "but we couldn't find them. So we went to Samuel to ask him where they were." "Oh, and what did he say?" his uncle asked. "He told us that the donkeys had already been found," Saul replied. But Saul didn't tell his uncle what Samuel said about the kingdom. Hi, Tracy. Hey, Langley. Welcome. We're reading through 1 Samuel chapter 10, and we're continuing at verse 17. Saul is acclaimed king. Later, Samuel called all the people of Israel to meet before the Lord at Mizpah. And he said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, has declared. I brought you from Egypt and rescued you from the Egyptians and from all the nations that were oppressing you. But though I have rescued you from your misery and distress, you have rejected your God today and have said, 'No, we want a king instead.' Now, therefore, present yourselves before the Lord by the tribes and clans." So Samuel brought all the tribes of Israel before the Lord, and the tribe of Benjamin was chosen by Lot. Then Lot, just so you know, it's like kind of like sticks in a way. So the shortest stick or whatever would be the odd one out, and that would be who would do it. It was a form of gambling back then, but it's something that happened a lot. I know that mainly because of them casting lots for when Jesus got crucified to get his like crowns and his clothes and stuff. Well, that was a sidebar. Verse 21. Then he brought each family of the tribe of Benjamin before the Lord, and the family of the Metrites was chosen. And finally Saul, son of Kish, was chosen from among them. But when they looked for him, he had disappeared. So they asked the Lord, "Where is he?" And the Lord replied, "He's hiding among the baggage." So they found him and brought him out, and he stood head and shoulders above everyone else. Then Samuel said to all the people, "This is the man the Lord has chosen as your king. No one in all Israel is like him." And all the people shouted, "Long live the king!" And Samuel told the people what the rights and duties of a king were. He wrote them down on a scroll and placed it before the Lord. Then Samuel sent the people home again. When Saul returned to his home in Gibeah, a group of men whose hearts God had touched went with him. But there were some scoundrels who complained, "How can this man save us?" And they scorned him and refused to bring him gifts, but Saul ignored them. Nahash, king of the Amorites, had been grievously oppressing the people of Gad and Reuben, who lived east of the Jordan River. He gouged out their eyes of each of the Israelites living there. He didn't allow anyone to come and rescue them. In fact, of all the Israelites east of the Jordan, there wasn't a single one whose right eye, Nahash, had not gouged out. But there were 7,000 men who had escaped from the Amorites, and they had settled in Jabesh Gilead. Well, that got intense really quick. May God add a blessing to the reading of his word. So we know where we're going from here. Sir I pluck outish. I think he might be going down. But we have a couple things going on. One, the self-doubt of Saul is kind of squashed. God gave Samuel instructions for these big things to happen. It wasn't just one thing. It was several different things that all happened in the way that they were supposed to happen. So it wasn't just, hey, look at this, the people are going to whatever, the donkeys are found. So like it was, one might have been a coincidence, two kind of still a coincidence, but as each of them piled on, Saul was like, okay, no, this is real. This is a real prophecy. God is choosing me. And as everything was going on, Saul, still filled with self-doubt, is found hiding until finally he's chosen and they gather him, and then they all start chanting like, all hail King Saul. And he's noticing like, yeah, I'm standing above everyone. People are like, I'm the answer to these people's prayers. Like, this is crazy. And as he goes home, some people are scoffing at him, but instead of him owning that, like he would have before, seemingly, he's just going like, okay, yeah, no, I don't need to worry about what you think of me. God's appointed me here. I can let your words fall off my shoulder, because you mocking me now isn't mocking me. It's mocking God. If God can take it, I can take it. I don't have to put up with your words, and I don't have to impress you. God's my ruler now, and I'm your ruler. But I'm just going to process all of this. And what a show of strength of character. When he knows who he is in God, those words, the people trying to pick on him, that made him feel small, even though he was obviously big, tall, handsome, with wealth and everything, he felt so small. And God's like, no, I got special things for you. I love you. I plan for you. You are special. Stop letting these words hold you down. Saul finally starts to see himself as God sees him. And I think that's a really cool thing. And it didn't happen right away. God knew Saul's heart. He knew that it would take time. That Saul wasn't, if he didn't have those couple days of prep, like he would not have been in a position to kind of be like, yeah, okay, I'm ruling with God. I'm doing all of this. Who knows what kind of doubts he would have had. But God gave him a heads up, like, hey, your life is going to change. And it's going to change for the better. Let's work on your heart. Let's work on things. A lot of times when we think about becoming a Christian, we think about that moment. When is that moment? And I can tell you, like, there was a moment when I started to look towards God, when I had the Samuels in my life speak into it and start guiding me and directing me. But it took months for my heart. Once I was like, all right, God, prove yourself to me. It took months for God to actually transform my heart to be something where I was ready to actually accept God. He likes us to change slowly sometimes, because that slow change has a tendency to last a lot longer than that instantaneous. That's something that I've found, at least. So yeah, God took time to prep Saul, which I think is good. We see Saul's growth. JJ, hey, hopefully things are going good. I saw a couple of pictures of the snowstorm. It looked pretty bad. Yeah. So there's a lot of really cool things in here in God's patience and the growth and the confidence of Saul in God and in himself once he accepts what God has for him. And then God took care of the donkeys, which I also think is kind of cool. And Saul got anointed in front of everyone, which is also cool. But then we get an introduction to the reality and the brutality that Israelites had to face in this day and age. Why they were so desperate for a king in the first place. Not only did they lose the Ark of the Covenant and felt like they lost God, but in the land of the Amorites, the ruler was like, "Oh, you got Israel?" I don't know why I did that accent. I'm sorry for anyone that speaks like that. Or that, yeah. He gouged out their eyes for being Israelites. I can't even imagine that. And these people that escaped, well, you know where they're going. They're going to be going to Saul, their new appointed king, for help. Oh man, I can't even imagine that. Forcing people to be blind just because they're of a different faith than you. But that's the reality of where they were. And there's a lot of places still in this earth today that are like that. It's tragic. I'm doing pretty good, JJ. Yeah. Hopefully work's going good. We can connect afterwards in a private message or whatever. I'd like to know how you're doing as well. So Saul's got some pretty big decisions going on, but we got foreshadowing on what's to come. And we know in like verse 16, things are going to change again. So I'm kind of excited for where the story's going, but it seems like the groundwork has been laid. There's still one more main character going to enter into the story, that being David, but his time has not come yet. So, but we've been introduced to two of the main characters of the story so far. We know Samuel. Now we see Saul. David's to come. But yeah, let's pray, and then I'll let you guys get on with your very snowy Tuesday. AJC, awesome Jesus Christ. I thank you so much for loving us, for working on our hearts. I read so many Facebook posts today about being bullied and not feeling like there's strength for today, and people just being jerks. And in this story today, that addresses that. Saul becomes king and people still mock him. And he just lets it slide. Because he's confident in who you've called him to be, how much you love and you care for him. Lord, let us take confidence in you, who you are, so that when people pick on us, bully us, scoff at us for loving you and for doing the best that we can, that we don't hold on to it, that we don't let it be this open wound that's constantly gushing out emotions of hurt and discouragement and despair, making us feel small and tiny, but let us be head and shoulders above everyone else because of our confidence in you. Let us not focus and be worried about pleasing everyone around us, but to be pleasing you. And in trying to please you and trying to serve you, you will lead us to serving others. And I thank you for that. I thank you for the paradox that can create sometimes, and the joy that gets to go beyond me and into those others. Help us to spread that. Help us to find confidence in who you've made us to be. And Lord, the dark times came and there was hope. But now there's dark times about to happen in this story. there's still a lot of suffering. There's still a lot of COVID. There's this new COVID on the horizon. There's a lot of things to be worried about and scared about. And Lord, we give it up to you. I thank you that our current measures are working, but that doesn't mean that there's still not a lot of emotional and mental and spiritual stresses on people and discouragements. I pray that you can comfort them, and those that are really struggling, that they can reach out to somebody that they can connect with in a way that's really going to help them out. Lord, thank you so much once again for this time together. In your name. Amen. All right. Well, thank you guys once again. Have a fantastic day. God bless.